The Metal Man, a Wild Nine story, written by A.R. Knight, dedicated to Ash. Chapter 1. Moonwalk. The man stumbled through the courtyard, veering across the wide space like an errant asteroid. Crowds parted around him, barely sparing the man a glance. He dressed like most of the others, though he seemed to have forgotten it. His blazer was open, his tie a whipping missile, striking his face in the wind. Bad luck that he'd chosen a recycling day when this section pushed out its stale air for the clean stuff. The fresh oxygen would help with the hangover, though, which the man would ride out in the holding tank. Mox nodded to the centurion beside him, eyes hidden by the helmets they both wore. Through his visor, Mox looked at the drunk and squinted. A green outline appeared around the staggering man, who was now looking around, realizing his predicament. The rest of Mox's vision coated over in translucent data. The man's name was Ryder Kond, and he'd been admitted to Luna on business from Earth, his first trip according to the logs. And a sizable bank balance.
Plenty of coin, first time up,
Mox said.
Classic case of moonwalking,
Yuri replied.
It's your turn.
Don't remind me.
Mox suppressed a sigh and moved towards the drunk. 2 weeks of daylight, and the sunshine was being spoiled by another one of these idiots. Launching their way to Luna on their climb up the corporate ladder, getting blasted in Luna's low pressure, and giving Mox grief. All around the drunk, people were moving towards a quartet of buildings ringing the courtyard, Luna's government center. All 4 corner towers connected to each other through sky bridges, arcing hallways and offices hanging in lattice shapes above the courtyard. During every brightening, as Luna called the 2 weeks of sun, the vast city traded with the far side of the moon, the courtyard filled with prismatic rays pouring through the glass dome. Mox set his hand on the drunk's shoulder, catching the man staring up at the light. Ryder turned towards Mox, looked at the helmet, the body armor, the flowing red cape, and gave a slippery grin.
Now there's what I was looking for,
Ryder announced.
A guardian angle.
Angel, you mean? Do you know where you are, Mr. Kand?
Ryder furrowed his brow.
The moon?
Ryder said, looking around.
You're not wrong. Have you been drinking, Mr. Kand?
Ryder stared at Mox for a few seconds, his eyes getting larger with every tick of time's clock. His mouth worked through a variety of expressions before settling back into the grin.
Oh, yeah!
Ryder yelled, throwing his fists in the air.
It was a great party. You should have been there.
Sorry to have missed it. Now that your party's over, though, it's time to find where you're supposed to be.
Mox reached up to his helmet and tapped a small circle just over his ear. It activated a broadcasting mic along a secure channel, allowing any other Centurions in the area to tune in.
Ops, can you run a check on a Ryder Kand? He's standing in front of me, drunk, and I need to know what he's doing here.
Check that.
A buzzing voice, someone at Ops, replied.
Ops? Who's that?
Ryder said, eyes tightening for a moment before dropping back into their wide-eyed innocence.
Also, man, I'm trying to get back to my hotel. You mind showing me to the Grand Mayor?
Yeah, let's go for a walk.
Mox took Ryder's arm and directed him towards one of the courtyard exits, the one leading towards the mag station, and, more importantly, away from most of the crowds. Sarge always pushed them to act on instinct, to trust that feeling when things weren't right, and follow it till they found the source.
Need an extra hand?
Yuri's voice came into the helmet.
Watch my back.
Who are you talking to?
The man's speech wasn't slurring as much, even in the couple minutes since the conversation started. Mox handled drunks by the dozen. By far the most common problem on Luna, mainly tourists. Sobering up when you've got a Centurion in your face wasn't exactly rare, but doing it that fast? Again, Mox heard Sarge in his head, beating in the commandment.
Don't worry about it. What business are you in, Mr. Kand?
Hey, man, I'm drunk.
Ryder replied, the slur surging back.
I work with coin, you know. It's complicated.
I bet.
They were nearing the exit to the courtyard, a series of escalators. half of which went down into the bulk of Luna's space, underground and away from radiation. Caves made habitable through coins willingly spent to be free from Earth's governance. The Centurions provided protection, and the commandment was their sword.
Anybody, anything at any time is worthy of suspicion and investigation.
This your first time on Luna, Ryder?
Mox said as they stepped onto the escalator.
Might be.
Ryder answered, clinging to the railing.
In fact, I believe it is.
Mox took in the words. His helmet analyzed their cadence, fed them through to ops. Liars had their tendencies. People with things to hide did too. Ryder's speech was veering around in speed, in enunciation. Drunks could do the same, but Ryder was establishing a pattern. His voice arced up towards the end of his sentences, the slur making itself known. But at the start, when Ryder was still working through what to say, that was clear and clean.
Hey, you're going the wrong way,
said a voice to Mox, from the next escalator over, going up. Erin, heading to work in Tower 3, her space-black hair curled up into a bun with a pair of strands hanging over her face, each of those strands pulling at Mox's eyes like the darkest opal. She knew he liked that style, knew he was patrolling today.
Work started early,
Mox replied as Erin went by.
Does that mean it'll end early?
If I'm lucky.
Ryder skipped down a couple steps. Mox watched the man for a moment, his feet in particular. A true moonwalker wouldn't get over 3 steps before falling over, but Ryder skipped his way down the escalator. Like the man was running. Wait! Mox burst forward, jumping the steps a few at a time.
Got a runner!
Mox yelled into the helmet.
Need backup at the base of the G tunnel.
Ryder heard the call, picked up speed, tossed a frantic look back at Mox. No way the man was drunk, which made him dangerous. Mox used his arms to propel himself down the escalator, bouncing the tips of his toes on the edges of the steps. As the crowds were all going up to the buildings, the one active escalator Mox and Ryder were using was empty. Ryder hit the hard floor, a slate-gray tile made to mirror actual moon rock, and veered right, towards a set of restrooms. Mox chased after him, talking into the helmet to track his progress. Sarge was already going to give him hell for letting Ryder out of his grip. Mox didn't want to break any other protocols. The restrooms were spotless, cleaned by bots triggered whenever someone used the facilities. Ryder didn't try the women's area, for which Mox was briefly grateful. The men's room had a trio of stalls along a back wall facing the entry. To the right of those were 3 urinals, all unused. Ryder stood past them, pressed against the side wall. Mox walked towards Ryder, his hand gripping the stunning baton attached to his waist.
Last chance, Ryder. Cooperate or you'll be taking a rough nap.
Sorry, man. There was no other way.
Ryder replied, a vicious smile lighting his lips.
Unfortunate.
Mox raised the baton. The 3 stall doors slammed open. A short woman sprung out of the one to Mox's left as he turned, tackling him and pushing Mox into the sinks. One shattered, spraying water against Mox's back, soaking his cape. He tried to swing the baton at the woman, who was pinning his left arm to his side, but then Ryder was there, holding Mox's right arm against the mirror above the sinks. A pair of masked men, heads covered in shirts pulled tight with holes cut around the eyes, ran up to Mox and tugged at his helmet. Ops yelled through the earpiece, asking for updates. Yuri's voice came through, saying he was on his way. Not that Mox had time.
Hang tight, buddy. This'll be over real quick,
Ryder said above the broken pipe's spraying hiss. Mox grunted, braced his right leg, and threw back his left shoulder. The woman smashed into the mirror and let go, glass falling around. His left arm free, Mox punched the first masked man in the stomach. The guy groaned and stumbled away. The second man rocked back, giving the helmet a strong tug, and Mox felt it snap off. Felt the sudden air on his scalp, the sudden quiet as voices stopped speaking into his ear. Then Mox's neck went numb. his arms and legs a second later, and then he was on the ground, soaking in the sink's growing puddle. Ryder held a small sidearm, illegal on Luna, small enough to palm.
Can't kill you with this,
Ryder said, holding it up.
much as I would love to. Thanks for the helmet, man.
Mox couldn't reply as Ryder and the others left, leaving him stunned on the floor of the bathroom, wondering what just happened. Chapter 2. Coffee and Crime. Aaron's wide, locked eyes told Mox all he needed to know. The bruises were dark, the cuts on his right arm from the mirror glass stinging and ugly. The slim, off-duty Centurion uniform, pants and shirt in a dusty red, would have done a better job covering if Mox hadn't rolled up the sleeves. Keeping them long made him feel trapped. As he took a seat across from Aaron at a squat two-person table in the bustling coffee shop, Mox pushed a smile onto his face to break the tension.
They let me off for the day.
Looks like you already had a full one. Why aren't you at home?
And miss our meeting?
Meeting? Is that what we're calling it?
Aaron relaxed back into the chair, wispy smoke from the coffee curling between her hair.
Unless you want to call it a date?
How about we go with coffee?
Aaron said, wrapping the words in sly swirls.
You want a date? I'm free tonight?
Could make that work. You got a place in mind?
I picked the coffee.
There's only one cafe in your building.
Complaining already?
Fine.
Mox held his hands up.
I'll come you once I find somewhere.
A rolling bot paused by the table. A tray on a ball kept stable by amounts of math Mox didn't want to contemplate. On the tray, beneath one mug, a blue circle lit up. Mox grabbed the coffee and the bot zipped away. Mox held the brew to his nose and inhaled the scent. The shots Ops had given him to knock out the stunning effects hours before, Mox would naturally recover, played with his senses, dulled the scent of roasted bitter beans.
So I've been avoiding it, but my break's almost up.
Aaron said, moving her eyes across Mox's scrapes.
I was jumped in a bathroom. It wasn't a fair fight.
Attack a Centurion? Who would do that?
Someone with a death wish, they'll be found.
And when they are, will you go?
Mox nodded.
Of course.
Aaron said, and Mox picked up the subtle edge. Tensed. Then Aaron shook her head, stared out the window.
How many times have we sat here, Mox?
Lost count.
8. 8 times since you asked me to share a drink with you. Every time since then, I've been trying to find a key into your world, into what makes you move.
At dinner, I'll tell you.
Aaron took a long drink from her coffee, then stood up.
I think I figured it out.
Aaron said, then softened, her eyes crinkling.
But I can't wait to hear it from your lips. Tonight, then.
Mox raised his own mug in goodbye, turned to his comm and skimmed Luna's nearby restaurants. His usual haunts would not make it. Too many Centurions. Too little luster for a woman like Aaron. Luster. Mox shook his head. He didn't know what food she liked, what style. These short coffee chats skimming the surface, each one digging just a little deeper into their lives. Tonight, though, tonight would be different. Chapter 3. Night Raid. Ops found them, the bastards. Clustered beneath an old mineral school, an art enclave where Luna's wandering souls could learn to forge, twist, and bend moon rock into sculptures. It was a religious experience, a chance to grow closer to a floating rock millions now called home.
Figures.
Mox said over the comm to Yuri.
They traced the helmet?
The idiots carried it all the way back before cracking it. Only reason it took this long was we had to confirm the trace was accurate. They'll load up in 30. Sarge wants to know if you're in.
Yuri could have said no pressure. Mox had the day to recover, to let the fast-acting gels seal his cuts overnight. Could wish Yuri good luck, go out with Aaron, and wake up tomorrow knowing justice had been done.
I'm going. Don't start without me.
That's on you.
Mox shot a one-liner to Aaron, asking to push the date till tomorrow, that they'd found the punks who'd jumped him. Then Mox slipped on his gear, his arms aching as they fit into the tight plates, tied on the red cape required when patrolling in public. It could get caught on anything, but Sarge bet big on the cape's mental effects. That swirling bright red, drove criminals to hand themselves over. And Sarge wasn't wrong. Luna had its share of crime, more with all the fighting on Mars bringing agitators Luna's way. Mox's cape and the threat of deportation ended most confrontations before they started. Centurion headquarters for Mox's quadrant wasn't far from the plaza he'd been at earlier, a rounded building in a cluster of stores known as Apollo's Market. Evening wasn't the quietest time, and Mox saw plenty of people doing what he should have been, strolling under the blue bright glow of Earth, wrapped in a shared experience. Instead, he went through the square double doors, thick slabs that acted as metal detectors and ID scanners, alerting posted Centurions just who was coming into the station. The briefing room was all black, nothing on the walls or floor. Walking into it felt like stepping into starless space. In the light from the hallway, Mox made out Yuri, Sarge, and a pair of other Centurions. A small crew for a raid.
Shut it!
Sarge said, gesturing towards the door. When Mox clicked it closed, dousing every light in the room, the world changed. Sarge, his hands moving through the air, pulled the mineral school up and around them. They were floating above the school, looking on a virtual image. Sarge brought them down, marking the two potential entrances for the two teams. Yuri and Mox from the back, Sarge and the two others from the front. Sarge swiped his hand, and the outer image flew away, replaced by an interior map. Hallways and wide rooms for classes. The school split into 4 sections, with a central hall linking all 4 rooms. Dead in the middle was a spiraling staircase made out of, what else? Moon rock.
There's nothing upstairs but an observatory. The school's owner says it's for reaching your center.
Sarge deadpanned.
What we want is underneath.
Sarge swiped again. The basement was a single large chamber, outlined in red.
As you can see, we haven't collected data on this room in a while. We're getting a 60% chance of changes here. Outside inspections haven't spotted any likely exits, but that doesn't mean they don't exist. The stairs is the only choke point.
Alive, sir?
Yuri asked.
Assaulting a Centurion means you're iced. If they don't know that, easy for us. But I'm betting they'll fight desperate.
Mox grinned.
I hope they do.
Heading to the raid, the 5 Centurions ditched the red capes for dark, reflective plating. Sarge figured the enemy would be armed, and it'd be better not to be a target. The ceramic deflected bullets and diffused the heat of a laser blast. The armor coated Mox's arms, chest, and legs, cramping their movement in exchange for protection. A trade Mox would make every day. Each one of them carried a standard issue, lunar rifle, bulky and double-barreled. The weapons punctuated their grip with a switch that slid the fire from laser to a slug magazine, ready to deal with any threat. A pair of sidearms hooked onto Mox's waist. Flashbangs, too, but no big explosives. Nothing that could break a seal and vent atmosphere. The 5 of them left the station and joined the evening mob of wanderers. As eyes fell on them, Mox noticed heads turned and conversations faltered. Arms wrapped tighter around shoulders. The capes brought respect. The armor brought fear.
Everyone synced?
Sarge asked over the helmet's comm. The 5 of them linked up, with Ops listening in. One by one, the Centurions sounded off.
On,
said Mox when it was his turn. The answer meant more than an active comm. It meant that his helmet showed the world in the green-tinged breakdown of Luna's security programming. Every person they passed had their data ready for Mox to look at, an outline that would expand if Mox narrowed his eyes at the target. Store names, streets, even sounds could be traced. The first time Mox put on a helmet, he'd had to shut his eyes every few seconds to calm himself. Black out the overwhelming flow of data. Now, though, seeing the world through his natural eyes felt empty, blind. To get to the sector with the mineral school and, hopefully, the thieves, the Centurions loaded into a pair of maglevs. The carts, holding up to 10 apiece, blitzed beneath Luna's surface through tunnels. Magnets pulsed the carts along to the places chosen on small pads on each of the seats. The cart took the directions from every passenger, calculated an optimal route, and went. Nobody wanted to get in with the 5 centurions, though, so the cart took them straight to their destination. Sarge initiated the mission as they walked out of the cart. Through Mox's visor, small icons for each of the 4 other centurions danced along the edge of his vision. An orange arrow shot forward along the ground, vanishing up the escalators. Mox's route, faded arrows in other colors mirrored his, all on the same path for now. Mox kept silent on the walk to the school. The comms were supposed to be secure, but why take chances? Yuri strode in front of Mox, back under Earth's glow. Unlike Apollo's market, the area around the school was empty. Educational sectors didn't get much use later in the evening. At a crossroads 1 block away from the school, Yuri broke off from the other 3 and headed towards a side street. Surrounding the school were a variety of buildings with different architecture. Some were squat, small places meant for single classroom subjects. Others flowed in interconnected webs meant to funnel students from one end to the other through the course of their studies. The beauty of the building depended on how wealthy the donor and the creator were. The alley splitting the block and leaving behind the school was immaculate. Bots scooped up garbage and litter on a regular schedule. Mox had seen the pictures of Earth, trash piles left between homes floating in the ocean, none of that here. Luna marketed itself as a paradise, and in many ways it was.
Status,
said Sarge over the comm.
In position.
Yuri replied. The 2 of them formed up outside the school's rear entrance. A small, single door, the handle showing little use, probably only for getting rid of trash projects nobody wanted. Through his helmet, Mox saw the outline of the door in orange, a designated objective. He reached out to touch the doorknob, twisted, and it moved slightly before being stopped. Locked.
Guess it's the hard way.
1-2 punch.
Going in 3.
wait until we go. We'll get their attention. You hit them from behind.
Mox and Yuri took a position on either side of the small door, their arms cocked. From the other side of the building, coming over the roof, Mox heard the staccato pops of a door breaker. A line of small explosives, placed on the frame, run along like tape. When lit, it would torch its way the door, making it fall without scattering debris everywhere.
Front hall's empty.
Sarge calmed.
Go!
Mox looked at Yuri and they nodded, swung their arms together. Mox felt his fist strike the sturdy door, felt the armor plates take the impact and channel it throughout his suit. Felt the door buckle, felt the hinges break, saw it collapse. In front of them was a medium-sized classroom, enough for 30 students. The far corner had a door leading back into the central area, where targets would likely be. Mox creeped through the classroom, keeping an eye out for anybody that might have been hiding in one of the corners or behind the scattered desks. The sides of the classroom were covered in displays showing formulas, techniques for molding moon rock into something less common.
You ever go to one of these?
You think I look like an artist?
Never know.
Halfway through the room, shouts broke out on the other side. Sarge announced over the comm that they'd been engaged. Mox broke into a run, Yuri close behind. Mox yanked the main hall door open while Yuri provided cover. The central room was chaos. Sarge and the other 2 centurions hunkered down towards the front entrance as lasers flashed at them from the back, right in front of Mox. The 2 guys from the bathroom that morning, not the man Mox chased, but the 2 hiding the stalls. They'd overturned tables, apparently ones in use given the scattered shards of moon rock across the floor, and were using them as cover. Mox wheeled out of the way as Yuri opened fire. The 2 enemies were without defenses from that angle, and Yuri's shots struck home, hitting the targets in their shoulders, in their heads, in their chests. Both crumpled. Yuri inched forward, Mox moving behind, both of them keeping their guns trained on the downed enemies. Sarge and his pair moved up from the front, took a position covering the stairs leading to the basement.
Mox, you want the owners?
Sarge asked, nodding to the stairs.
Nothing more.
He moved to the top of the stairs. They spiraled into the darkness. Rails ran along their length. Sarge posted the other 2 centurions at the front and back entrances to the building and planted himself across the top of the stairs, aiming his weapon down. Yuri stood behind Mox, waiting for the big man to descend. Mox readied his own rifle and took the first step, then the second, each one a tentative touch. There was always a chance that someone planted explosives beneath the steps. It had happened before. Mox's helmet switched over into night vision mode as he went further. The basement took on a green tint, only without the data overlay. Mox could make out piles and piles of moonrock and other junk, tools like hammers and chisels, and a prone body lying on the ground. The woman who'd jump at him.
Have one down.
Mox calmed.
No sign of the leader.
Mox walked the remaining steps, Yuri close behind. Aside from the junk and the body, the basement seemed empty. Mox couldn't see any other exits, no obvious places to run to. So he went over to the girl, knelt in front of her face, and as he reached for her, she opened her eyes. Chapter 4. Sacrifice. Mox started back, swung his rifle up, and pointed the barrel at her face. Her eyes looked up at him, her mouth set in the straight, fierce line. Mox noticed her arms, trapped beneath her fallen body. They looked like they were holding something.
"Tonight I die for a cause,"
said the woman in a whisper.
"Will you?"
What?
Run!
Yuri cried, shoving his way past Mox and diving on top of the woman. The shove was hard. Mox fell back to the foot of the stairs, saw Yuri struggling with the woman, and then a white flash. Yuri flew across the room and bounced off the far wall, clattering to the floor with a cavalcade of other tools and half-completed projects. Mox's helmet went out, its receptors obliterated by the blast. Heat washed over him, suffocating. But then it vanished, and the school still stood. The plates they wore, Mox knew, were designed for this disaster. They were trained to stop any catastrophic explosion. A centurion would sacrifice their body, jump on a bomb to save Luna.
Sarge, man down.
Mox calmed.
Hostile had an explosive.
We've already got medical on the way.
Ops said into his ear. As Mox went over to Yuri, he glanced back towards where the woman was. There was nothing left save a greasy black mark on the basement floor. Chapter 5. Ruin. 10 hours later, being in the courtyard was bleak. Not that there weren't dozens, hundreds of people heading into their offices, but it was bleak because the person that mattered wasn't there. Yuri, in the hospital, still alive, but Ops wasn't optimistic. The man would have to fight and fight hard if he wanted to make it out. Years together in this courtyard ruined for a cause. Earth loomed in the sky overhead. It used to be that the planet was a beautiful sight, a sign of humanity's origins. Now, though, it was the place where these terrorists, where that woman had come from. Sitting on his bench, Mox fidgeted, wished that he could do something other than patrol the courtyard. Other than waiting, watching for something to happen. Sarge said they would continue following leads, find Ryder caned, understand what he was after. It was like being stuck in a long movie when all Mox wanted to see was the end.
You okay?
Said Aaron, coming up behind him.
Yuri's hurt.
Hurt? What happened?
Mox relayed the events, measuring Aaron's face as she heard about the explosion. Mox always felt he was a strong man, ready to take on any challenge that came his way. He'd gone through training camp with little effort, running over the other recruits, spending more time in the gym than anybody. He maintained his Earth Active certificate, meaning his body was strong enough to handle Earth's gravity. Everything he'd done, it had been to get to the top of the class. Except he hadn't seen the bomb, hadn't saved his friend.
It's not your fault. It wasn't your bomb. It wasn't your attack.
I should have stopped it.
Mox, stop whining. You can be sad, you can get angry, and then you can do something about it.
Max couldn't help it, he laughed. Aaron the desk jockey talking to him about loss, about giving up. There was no way she understood. Then again, maybe she didn't have to in order to make a point.
Maybe you're right. If I promise to get rid of the attitude, are we still on for tonight?
You going to ditch me again?
Hope not, but I have a condition.
Erin tilted her head, eyebrows lilting up.
We visit Yuri first.
Deal.
Erin glanced at her comm.
I've gotta go. Some of us don't get to hang around the courtyard all day.
Won't catch me complaining. The view is spectacular.
Mox watched Erin disappear into the milling crowd, surging towards the towers. Mox wasn't even sure what floor she worked on, what she did. Erin was a total cipher. Mox replayed the conversations they'd had right here, in this shop, shaking his head. All they ever did was talk about Mox and what he did, who he stopped, what crimes were being prevented around Luna all day long. Erin never talked about herself, and Mox let her remain hidden.
That changes tonight,
Mox muttered. Mox stood, bones hurting from last night's explosion. The red cape billowed around him, catching stares from the crowd. He caught their eyes, their comforted faces, most giving him small grins or nods. These were his people. This was his job, was his duty. Erin was right, there was no time for moping. The flashes came first. People looked up, catching the fiery ripples as they came out of the glass arcs connecting the towers. Mox was turning his head up as the sound hit. Crackling booms followed by raining glass sprinkling throughout the courtyard. Up above, an angry orange nova expanded, rippling its way through the glass floors, exposing steel beams and flinging bodies and equipment everywhere. Mox stared. What else was there to do but watch the destruction and wonder who?
Mox on reports of an explosion.
Ops said.
Confirm.
They've detonated the causeway, disconnected the towers.
The glass tendrils were collapsing, bending and snapping away from the towers themselves. The sight of those arcs breaking apart, the ripping shatter of the glass and bending steel bars, pushed Mox back into himself.
Run to the lower levels,
Mox shouted, his voice barely audible over the continued screams and trampling noise of people rushing through the courtyard. It wasn't like there were many exits, they'd probably find their way out anyway. Another boom came from above, this one in the tower on the northeast side, Erin's tower. Towards the top, radiant blue arcs spread out like a wave, a ring discharging hot energy. Mox had seen those before. Nova detonators. Restricted to military use, they caused an overcharge of electrical equipment in the vicinity, meant to disable ships, to burn them out of the sky with their own hardware. Here, though, on Luna, where everything was connected, the entire tower shimmered as the blue wave spread down the floors, shattering glass windows as it went. Mox ran towards the building, pushing his way towards a mass of people running the other direction. When he collided with the crowd, frantic people hit him, scratched him, tried to push him out of the way, and Mox replied in kind. He pushed, he shoved, parted the crowd as best he could with his protected arms and legs. Ops was trying to yell into his ear, give him orders, but Mox couldn't hear them, and he would not listen anyway. The rain of glass grew thicker as Mox approached Erin's tower. Other shaking booms echoed from across the courtyard, Nova bombs going off in the other 3 towers. The entire complex was coming down, but there was only one person Mox had to save.
Erin, you there?
Mox calmed. He made it to the foot of the tower, the building's great doors standing in front of him, still intact, locked open as an endless torrent of people fled. Mox paused. He could go in there, fight his way up the stairs, but he didn't know where Erin worked. And in a tower with 100 floors, what were the odds he'd find the right one? But she had to come out through here.
Mox.
Erin's voice came in full of static, interference from other signals, or her comm was barely functioning.
I'm almost down to the lobby.
A groan, an inhuman one. The sound of tortured metal forced to bend against its will carried to Mox. He looked up and saw the tower listing, the remnants of the glass arc pulling the tower over. The ground rumbled as the foundation tore apart. Even in the moon's lower gravity, something with as much mass as the tower needed support.
Hurry, your building's going to collapse.
In front of him, an older man carrying a large picture tripped and fell. The crowd rushed around him, some stamping on his back, others trampling over the picture. Mox pushed forward, grabbing the man by his shoulders and pulling him up to his feet. Blood streamed around, cuts in the man's face, bruises forming from boot kicks. Mox pulled the man away, out of the stream of people, pushing and shoving and using the red cape as a way to part the teeming mass. Everyone had lost their minds. Mox pulled the old man onto a bench and turned back towards the tower, now a couple 100 meters away. The crowds were thinner, the ones left moving slower, older, and fragile. And that's when Mox saw it happen, saw the top half of Aaron's tower simply slide off, crack and fall forward towards them. The glass arc stabbed down like a pickaxe. The old man looked up at that falling mass, his mouth open, and Mox tackled him, pressed him to the ground with his armor-plated body. The arc struck first, lancing into the center of the courtyard, kicking up dirt and dust, breaking through the tile and hitting electrical conduits, sending light poles flickering. Mox felt the rumbling ground, and then the impact as waves of glass and other equipment slammed into his back. The moon's gravity was enough to make the tower fall, but it didn't fall quickly. It didn't have the same crushing power that it would have on Earth. The split building coasted towards the ground, crumpling over them with a grinding roar. The cacophony overwhelmed Mox, and all he could do was close his eyes and focus on keeping the man covered. It felt like forever. It felt like an instant. But at the end of it, when the scattered screams of the injured replaced the sound of crumbling metal, Mox opened his eyes and saw the man's terrified, bleeding face in front of his. But the man was alive.
We need everything.
Mox calmed Ops.
It's already on the way. Do what you can. Find and rescue survivors.
Mox rose, planting his hands on the ground and, using his legs, forced a desk off of his back. From there, it was a matter of digging, of reaching up through the dust and rubble and spreading it apart to see beyond the haze. Up in that sky, Earth's blue halo.
Thank you,
the old man said before erupting in a hacking cough.
Can you move?
I think so.
Then run.
Mox lifted himself out of the hole and looked. One of the other towers had fallen, while the other two were leaning to their sides, tops touching. Luna's emergency crews were already on site, some of them positioning themselves where they could keep the leaning towers from falling over by putting up support. Drones flew through the air, tagging wounded and trapped survivors. Shouts for help and for orders filled the courtyard, which was otherwise silent after the endless roars of the bombs and falling buildings, as though someone had muted half of the sound.
Erin, are you there?
Mox turned towards the wreckage of her tower and walked, picked his way over broken furniture and broken bodies. The dust in the air made it impossible to see more than a few meters ahead, so Mox switched his helmet to the infrared spectrum. Heat signatures popped out of the grayscale universe. In the haze, that'd help him find any bodies.
Mox?
Erin's voice was weak, quiet.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Where are you?
The lobby. I didn't make it out. It's not yet collapsed, but we can't open the doors. They're blocked.
Mox broke into a run, or at least as much as he could muster without falling over. A mass of green and blue and red broke out of the haze in front of him. Heat signatures. People. And Erin might be with them.
Hold on, I'm going to try to get through to you.
The wall of rubble blocking the doors was immense. Broken steel beams, office furniture, an endless array of ceiling tiles, carpeting, and mangled bodies stacked in front of him.
Oops, I got a lot of people trapped in the lobby of Tower 3.
We're moving, but heavy crews are busy keeping remaining towers upright. Recommend you dig a way out if possible.
Mox looked to the left and right of the wall. Given the way the tower fell, there might be an opening in the side. Mox ran along the wall to the corner of the building and then around. As he moved, the tower made another long series of groans. Still a lot of rubble on top. A crumbling pile of wreckage that threatened to collapse the lobby in on itself. The side of the tower was a better prospect, dusty and dirty, but clear of heavier barriers. There were offices here, their windows pointing out to the courtyard.
Erin, come to the west side.
Coming.
Mox looked around and grabbed a shattered piece of a steel bar. He hefted it in a double grip and brought it down on one of the long, tall office windows standing in front of him. It broke apart, glass falling everywhere, but now there was a way in and a way out. Mox went in the office and noticed bits and pieces of ceiling tile were dropping from above. The structure was getting worse and worse. They had to get out now. Mox yanked open the office door and stared into swirling dust.
This way.
Answering yells came from down the hallway, and soon Mox saw the first stragglers approaching. They had their sleeves, scarves, napkins pressed to their mouths and noses to keep from inhaling the dust. They struggled along, feeling their way. Mox ushered them through the office, pushing them out the window, telling them to run towards the closest set of lights, to get away from the tower as fast as possible. 5, then 10 people went by, and still no sign of Erin. The stream slowed to a trickle, one last one walking past.
Wait.
Mox grabbed the woman's shoulder.
Where's Erin?
I don't know who you're talking about,
The woman said.
but there's some stuck back there still.
Mox sprinted down the hallway into the large rectangle of the lobby. In the center, Mox saw a few tangled bodies still moving, trapped under a large section of the ceiling.
Mox?
Erin, half of her caught beneath the pile of rubble. Mox ran over to her, started pushing away the wreckage.
Sorry this fell just after you asked us to move.
Erin said as Mox threw away a chunk of it, an office chair.
My comm is broken, so I couldn't tell you.
Don't worry, I'll get you out.
Above them, the ceiling crackled, more tiles falling with heavy, terrifying thuds. Some of the other trapped people yelled in terror, some of their screams silenced as falling chunks made their ends. Mox stood over Erin, blocking any pieces so they bounced off his armor-plated back rather than her. He ripped away a slab of carpet, exposing Erin's battered legs, her tan pants shredded.
Can you move them?
I think so, just a bit more.
Mox was moving as fast as he could, but his arms were tired. He could feel the burning along his muscles, feel the exhaustion slowing him down. Everything felt heavy, painful, but there were only a few more chunks, one last mass of carpet and plaster. Mox turned and heaved the pile off, and then Erin was crawling free. Mox reached down, grabbed Erin's arm and picked her up, moved towards the hallway to the exit. And then the world collapsed. The weight of a falling building crushing Mox and swallowing him in blackness. Chapter 6. Recovery. The halo in the sky was white. Mox blinked. Not the sky, the ceiling, a bright lamp. Mox turned his head to the side and saw the medical bot, long and lanky and covered in instruments, stride into the room.
Congratulations, Mr.
The bot started.
It's just Mox.
Very well, you survived.
The bot paused. Mox wondered if he should be elated, and maybe he was, but happiness was buried right now between an endless cascade of aches from throughout his body, all of them blunted through the liquid hanging in the IV bag next to the bed.
And with minor injuries, aside from the concussion, provided you show no further symptoms, we should be releasing you this afternoon.
The bot turned to leave.
Wait, were there any other survivors? A woman, Erin?
You came with many others from the tower wreckage. I am unclear to whom you might be referring. I apologize,
The bot said, before walking out of the room. A few minutes of staring later, Sarge came by. His official uniform, a pairing of white with red accents, fit tight. Sarge looked at it briefly and grimaced, then snapped his eyes to Mox.
Glad to see you made it.
Ever have a building fall on you?
That's an achievement unique to you, I believe.
Did she live, the woman I was with?
Sarge shook his head.
You were crushed and she was beneath you. Your plating kept you alive.
Sarge didn't need to explain what happened to Erin. Mox kept his face straight. There would be time for that later.
And Yuri?
He's pulled through the rough part.
Sarge said, brightening.
He'll make it out.
Mox nodded. At least there was that. Then his mind slipped back to the tower, to the frantic digging to get Aaron out of the lobby, to the effort of getting the old man to safety.
I should have been able to save her, but I wasn't strong enough.
No man would have been. Get your rest. Take the next few days off.
If they find the one that blew up the towers, I want in.
You'll be first in line.
Mox settled back on the pillow, shut his eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Chapter 7. The Doctor. The coffins, sculpted from moon rock, launched towards Earth one by one. The same magnetic rail cannon that could send armored goods to the moon's sister planet gave a last flight to Aaron, hours sailing through space before becoming a firework in Earth's atmosphere.
You said you wanted to be stronger. I've left an address on your comm. Celine Stone is the only one who can help you, if you want it.
Mox turned away from the screen, a small display set against the grime-covered gray wall of the clinic's waiting room. 3 chairs splayed around the floor, their cushions so stained and torn that Mox preferred to stand. Overhead, a pale light flickered when Luna's mag trains shot by above. The taste of metal filled Mox's mouth. A heavy lock turned, weights sliding to dislodge a door from its seal.
"It's time,"
the woman said, her ghostly hair flowing out from the welder's mask covering her face. A thick apron plastered her front, black gloves wrapping up her hands to her elbows.
"No second thoughts, I hope."
Mox shook his head.
"Good. I don't give refunds."
The woman disappeared back into the room she'd come from, leaving the heavy door open. Mox walked through.
If you go, understand it won't be easy, though I don't think that'll be a problem for you.
The doctor was shifting a card over beside the lone bed in the room's center. Mox's eyes went to the object hanging above, a series of interlocking metal plates, each one with sharp points sticking out of one side. Points that would soon be cutting into him. The rest of the room was full of tubing, machines spitting numbers on readouts Mox couldn't parse. He could die here, and he wouldn't understand how.
On the bed, if you would.
A man, dressed like the doctor, appeared next to Mox, stepping out of the reception office, its narrow slit looking out into the waiting room.
You wear multiple hats.
We keep it lean around here.
The bed was cool to the touch, covered in plastic.
"It's easier to clean out the blood than fabric,"
the doctor said, drawing a syringe full of a clear liquid.
"You won't be awake to care anyway."
I don't want to pass out. I want to feel it.
The doctor laughed, a wispy cackle.
"I don't think so. The sedative's for my safety, not for your machismo. When your nerves meet their new friends, I don't want them spasming into my face. Now, on the bed."
Mox swung his legs onto the mattress, set his head face down. A hole cut out in the mattress let him stick his face through. On the floor in front of him, stained into the gray steel, were splotches of rust iron red. He'd be adding his own drops soon.
"Take your last breath as a human, because you won't be one when you wake up,"
the doctor hissed next to his ear. Mox felt the pinch of the needle and followed the pain into oblivion.
When you wake up, come find me at Strawman's Spirit. There's someone you should meet. Sarge.
Chapter 8. New Life. Strawman's Spirit, a dive for moonrock miners, the ones riding grinding bots through the crust, gathering minerals and creating new living spaces for Luna's growing populace. Mox pressed on the sliding door, and it shot open, swinging on its hinge and ramming against the wall. The sparse crowd looked up at who would bother banging a door this early in the morning.
Sorry,
Mox said to the bartending bot, an older model covered in grease stains and rust. It nodded back at him, the bot's blockhead a poor substitute for a friendly face. Sarge sat at the bar, a cloudy yellow beer sitting in front of him. Mox, every step shooting fiery pain along his legs, walked over, took the seat, and held up 2 fingers. The bot, seeing the order, grabbed an unlabeled bottle of whiskey from the shelf with one arm, notched a glass on the bar with a second, poured the exact amount, then shoved the glass precisely in front of Mox with a third. Then it hesitated.
It's on me,
Sarge said.
You got it.
The bot replied, then rolled along the bar to help a man sitting on the far end.
It hurts.
It's worth it. I've seen what those exoskeletons can do.
Why aren't they mandatory?
Because they're banned. No augmented centurions. Too dangerous. They pushed Celine underground for even offering it.
Then why?
Sarge took a long pull on the beer. Turned to look at Mox.
They figured out how the bombs made it into the towers. That suspect rider. He used your helmet, took data from it, used it to get access after hours to those buildings and plant the explosives. Was probably doing it while we raided the school last night.
I don't understand.
You didn't disable the helmet before they stole it. And when the bombs went off, you didn't guide people to the exit. You ran towards one tower, left hundreds of people confused, their lives at risk.
It was chaotic.
Sarge shook his head.
You went for the woman.
Sarge paused. Mox knew Sarge expected him to deny it, to fight, but there wasn't anything to deny.
They'll be dismissing you as soon as you report back. Gross negligence.
So I have nothing.
No, you've got that suit and the power that goes with it.
Sarge raised his glass towards the man at the end of the bar.
That guy there, he's a regular through Luna, does security jobs. He'll take you on.
I'm not leaving.
Mox took his first sip of the whiskey. It burned his throat raw, the harsh heat a welcome distraction from the pricks running up and down his body.
Not until I find Ryder Cand.
That won't be hard. We know where he is.
Why are you here then?
They want to see who he's working with. The plan is to follow him, track his associates, then pin him for the crime.
He'll get away.
That's why I'm here.
Sarge tapped on his comm. Mox's own wrist buzzed a second later.
That's the location.
Sarge gulped down the rest of his beer, stood up.
You were a good man, Mox. Don't let that stop now.
Sarge disappeared out the doors. Mox watched them swing shut, took another pull of the whiskey. When he turned back, the man sitting at the far end had moved next to him.
Does it hurt?
The man asked.
'Cause it looks like it does.
Like hell.
Name's Davin. Sarge said you needed work.
Have a job first.
Sarge mentioned that too.
Davin took a swig of the beer.
Will help.
Don't need it.
Sure, but I need to see whether you're worth hiring. It's an audition.
Mox stared at the remaining whiskey, the amber sitting still in the glass. He'd either end up dead tonight or leaving home. Possibly as a wanted man. Mox finished the burning booze, stood up from the stool.
Then let's get started.
Chapter 9. Vengeance. Ryder was in Crater's Edge, an abandoned district full of crumbling hotels and resorts blanketing an asteroid crater's rim, their blocky construction owing to Luna's origin. Built before architects used the moon's low gravity to create buildings like the Four Towers and their glass walkways. Crater's Edge fell apart as fancier resorts captured tourists and their coin, leaving empty structures sitting for whomever wanted them. Mox met a fair few of those on patrol, the hidden parts of Luna's ecosystem, pushed to where nobody noticed them. And so Crater's Edge survived in the aftermath of Luna's birth, its luxuries home to those without. Davin put a hand on Mox's shoulder as they came up to a grand marquee naming the building, in block letters, Starlight's Refuge. It was 7 stories tall, but beyond the sign, a gilded starburst of letters that fit the name, the hotel resembled a concrete block. Mox had patrolled through this area before, and inside that derelict hotel would be hundreds of squatters. People that had either come to Luna expecting great things and not finding them, or, having lost them, wound up here.
Pause for a second.
Why?
Because he wants to know that I've scoped this place,
said a woman emerging from the entrance.
Your target's on the 3rd floor. He's got a big room and an audience.
Phyla, meet Mox.
Hate to be on your bad side.
Phyla stepped up and extended her hand. She wore fatigues and a leather jacket covered in pockets. From the bulges, Mox could tell some of them were full. No sign of nerves on her face, eyes strong and focused. Phyla wasn't a rookie. Mox shook her hand.
That's one hell of a suit you got there. Bet it didn't come cheap.
Here you're hiring.
Have to make it through tonight first. Let's go.
Mox led them into the building. When Phyla said she'd scoped it, she'd hacked into the building's systems, the ones that were left anyway. She could see some hallways, could pick up high noise levels, could even listen in on rooms, remnants of old recording networks meant for conferences. That's how she found Ryder, and now it was Mox's job to take him out. The elevators had long since stopped working, so Mox led them towards the stairs at the end of the floor. The inside of the Starlight's refuge wasn't much better than the out, its carpets rotted and tearing, any artwork long since destroyed or stolen. But the light stayed on, most of the doors still locked, the essentials remained.
So, what's your story?
Phyla asked as they went up the stairs.
Centurion.
Silence for a moment.
He doesn't talk much.
Fine by me. You talk enough for everyone.
Third floor gave away its occupant by sound alone. Standing on the landing, the wide-open hallway door braced by a shadow-gray moonrock, Mox could hear Ryder's voice. The man was yelling in the tones of a rallying cry. His exclamations furious and full of spit. Shouts followed each claim, but it wasn't the roar of the crowd, no, more the calls of a few devoted followers.
We go slow, I go in, head straight for him, you cover me.
Phyla and Davin nodded, both pulled sidearms from holsters on their waists. Mox would have reached for a gun, but he didn't have one. Wouldn't need one either. The exoskeleton reminded him of its existence through pain, the possibility of power. It was there with every movement he took. The knowledge that if he focused, pressed a little harder, the suit would go into action and launch him towards the room, towards the man who'd killed so many. But he walked, and when Mox looked in the room, Ryder was still talking. Standing on a small stage meant for larger bands, the terrorist looked small. No mic, just his hands, worn-out shirt and stained jeans. Speaking to a crowd of 10. 10 angry, fist-shaking people who looked as though they would leap at his every word. Mox ignored them, walked towards the back of their formation and shoved his way through. He kept his eyes on Ryder, who matched his stare.
What we have here, friends, is our common enemy,
Ryder said.
A product of corporate control. The very same enforcers that plague our friends on Mars. Now he is here among us. Let's show him proper courtesy.
The people spread out around Mox, looking at him like the courtyard crowds did every day. Only these eyes held fear and anger. Mox kept moving towards the stage. A man, a grizzled and frazzled beard hanging down from his chin like mossy black vines, took the first swing. Mox moved his arm to block, the exoskeleton turning on and shoving the attacker's arm with so much force that the man flew across the circle and into a pair of other fighters. A second attacker jumped on his back, pulling at Mox's neck, and the sound of metal on metal rang from his legs. A knife meeting the exoskeleton. So Mox jumped. The suit threaded strength through his calves, and Mox launched into the air, carrying the man on his back all the way up into the ceiling. Mox ducked his head just before they hit, twisting himself so that the man struck first, breaking into the stone above. Then they fell. Mox hit the ground and rolled, the impact knocking the breath out of him. The exoskeleton could launch, but he'd have to learn how to land. Mox laid on his back, gasping, when a woman stepped over him. Mox saw her knife, a long one, held in her hand and pointed straight at his heart. Her hair, though, black, like Erin's, messy with a few strands hanging down and framing her thin face. Mox couldn't raise his arm, couldn't hit a face so like hers. Blue lasers flashed, striking the woman in the side. Her stab stopped, and the woman crumbled off of him. Phyla reached out her hand. Mox took the grip and lifted himself up as another fighter came at them. Phyla didn't hesitate, didn't even look like she thought about what she was doing. But the sidearm flipped out and fired. The fighter went down hard.
Don't just stand there. Go after him.
Phyla said to Mox.
Davin and I can clean up.
Right.
Mox turned in time to see Ryder dash through a door to the left, backstage. Mox jumped on top of the platform and followed. Through the door was a short hallway leading past small dressing rooms and storage closets. The sound of Ryder's boots on the hard floor led the way. Mox pushed his suit, and he flew through the hall, bounced off the corner, and shot towards the level's main hallway. Ryder disappeared through the backstage door. Mox hit it a second later, blasting it off its hingus so hard it bounced against the far wall.
Ryder, you can't run,
Mox said to the man. Ryder was only meters away, and he stopped, turned around.
Where's your cape, Centurion? Where's your armor?
That doesn't matter,
Mox said, closing the distance.
But it does. You accuse me of killing beyond the law, and yet here you are doing the same thing.
I don't care.
Mox pushed off the ground, leapt the last few meters, and grabbed Ryder by the throat. Mox didn't stop his momentum, dragging Ryder down the hallway until they reached the stairwell. Then he went up. Ryder tried to talk, but Mox tightened his grip, choked away the words. He didn't care what Ryder had to say. At the top of the stairs, a door plastered in faded red warnings about the roof gave way to a wide, flat expanse, and from there to a ledge. Mox lifted Ryder into the air, dangling him above the long fall.
This won't bring them back, but it will keep you killing anymore.
We're on the moon, idiot. This fall won't do anything.
I know.
Mox glanced at his comm on the wrist, holding Ryder out in space. A call was incoming, the one he was waiting for. Max tapped it.
Drop him whenever you're ready.
Sarge's voice came from the comm.
You didn't make it hard to find.
Ryder's eyes went wide, and Mox let go. He followed Ryder's fall into the hands of a waiting squad of Centurions. The Centurions stunned, tied, and carried Ryder away.
Ops isn't real happy that you blew their plan, but screw them. Proud of you, Mox.
Don't let him get away.
He won't.
The call clicked off, and Mox was alone on the rooftop. Overhead, as ever during the bright period, Earth glowed blue. Chapter 10. A Wild Nine. The freighter looked like a designer's nightmare, crashing together different shapes and sizes. Mox, carrying a pair of large bags holding clothes and the few things he considered his, stared at the thing for a full minute.
Could be your new home if you want it,
Davin said, coming down the loading ramp.
Promise the jumper looks better inside than out.
I don't judge.
Go on in. Trina will show you your cabin, provided you let her take a look at that suit of yours,
Davin said. Mox nodded and walked up the ramp, then paused.
I was a Centurion. What am I now?
Mox, welcome to the Wild Nines.
This is the end of The Metal Man, A Wild Nines prequel by A.R. Knight. Text copyright 2017, all rights reserved. To find more of our books, check out www.blackeybooks.com. Thanks for listening.